Okay, here we are. I think we are just about live, and I just want to make sure I'm up on all of the different channels. So let's give it a second here. Let's see here. Almost. I'm here, and I'm about to start a podcast. I'm super excited about it. Okay, there we go. And boom, there we go. Okay. Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of I Love Being Sober, sponsored by Camelback Recovery, Arizona's preferred sober living option to help AA newcomers stay sober during their first year in the program. If that's you or someone you know, then you're in the right place, because my name is Tim Westbrook, and I'm the CEO and founder of Camelback Recovery, here in the always sunny and always sober Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people to stop their suffering and continue on their path to recovery. Let's get clear on one thing. We believe that a relapse or a slip is not a part of recovery. And that's exactly why this podcast is dedicated to you or any loved one you know in their first year of striving to live a clean and sober life. The purpose of this podcast is to come clean with all of the misinformation that's out there about recovery, addiction treatment, mental illness, and the strategies to stay sober in general. So if you believe you're in the right place, or if you know someone who is struggling with addiction, it's my privilege to share this podcast with you. Now, I have no idea if you and I have ever met, but what I do know is that AA saved my life. And I also know that to find long-term recovery and live happy, joyous, and free, it's not just about stopping your drinking, drugging, gambling, sexual indiscretions, or any other addiction you may have struggled with or suffered from. Because at Camelback Recovery, we believe that sobriety can and should be fun. And look, any recovery process is not easy. It is challenging. It can sometimes be annoying. And for the most of us, it is often difficult to stay on the path. But here's the good news. The self-awareness you gain from listening to this podcast, especially if you are in your first year of recovery, will help you make better choices, which will ultimately lead you to living a kick-ass sober life. Visit camelbackrecovery.com to learn more about our treatment strategies for alcoholism, drug addiction, or mental illness. And we even offer recovery coaching so that you can enjoy the freedom and happiness you've always searched for. Now, what if I told you that telling your secrets could have a massive positive impact on your life? And what if I told you that dissecting your past through writing, you could change the narrative of your story? How freeing would that be? Today, I'm here with a mental health professional who has spent over 25 years serving individuals struggling with addiction and mental health disorders. In that time, she has provided counseling, facilitated groups and interventions, crisis management, and executed treatment plans, which led to hundreds of individuals finding a way out of a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. She has also multiple articles in the Huffington Post and 2 published memoirs, Load and Incorrigible, where she shares her own struggles with addiction and her ultimate recovery. My guest today is Wendy Adamson, and we're going to talk about changing the narrative of your story by dissecting your past through writing. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tim. I loved the opening, all of that wonderful information that you give newcomers. That's amazing.
Yeah, as we know, I mean, it's the newcomers are kind of the focus. It's most people don't make it to a year. We know that.
Right.
We know that 90% won't make it to a year. So whatever information we can share today, that's the focus is the newcomer. And I mean, other people can also gain some value from this, obviously. I mean, shoot, I've seen people relapse after a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And as we're going to talk about today, part of that has to do with the narrative of their story, the narrative of their past, the trauma from their past.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's when I first got sober, I've been sober since 11/11/93. So I've got like 28 years sober. Mm-hmm. When I first got sober, the framework in which I saw everything was like victimese. I spoke the language of victimese, that it was everybody else's fault. It was my schizophrenic mother's fault, my alcoholic father's, my at the time cheating husband's fault. It was everyone else's fault, and in hindsight, having I do think writing is for everybody, that writing is a powerful tool. And that's why so often it's, people are told to journal because it helps. It helps take the bullets out of the chamber, if you will, because we could be a loaded gun walking around the city emotionally, and putting it on paper is like taking the bullets out of the chamber. But when the framework, when I first got sober, that language of victimese, I didn't realize how I was giving my power away, blaming everybody else,
Yeah, I love that, victimese. I've never heard that before, but it's in AA, and in my recovery, I've learned to take responsibility for every single thing in my life. I'm responsible for everything. I heard it, and that's freeing, because if I'm responsible for everything, then there's nobody else that I can blame anything in my life. I mean, if I'm responsible, then I can start taking action. Even if there are other things that people did or whatever, it doesn't really matter. This is my life. I'm responsible for it. And everything that happens to me is my responsibility. I heard a guy speak recently, or he wrote a book, and he talks about not forgiving people. It was actually Derek Sivers wrote a book, and it's called Hell Yeah or No. And in that book, one of the chapters, he talks about not forgiving anybody, because if you forgive somebody, then that means that they were wrong. So he doesn't ever forgive, because it's always his fault. Everything. And if this person stole from me, well, it's my fault, because I made her, whatever I did, my behavior led her to believe that she could steal from me. That's just an example.
Yeah, it would be, for me, when I was new, that would have been a huge leap, like a quantum leap for me to think in those terms, because of the framework, and I had to, it's like the premise that we start with where one's at,
Right.
I was a drug and alcohol counselor in a detox for 5 years. And then after that, an outpatient program. And, it's like, I always had to start with where they were at, because it's like, it's like sometimes they can't make that leap.
Yeah.
Coming to believe, is a process, and so it's like, that's why looking under the hood through writing and, kind of confronting the way we see things, the way we frame things, is very powerful and was very instrumental. And there's no mistake that writing is part of the steps. And then we ultimately get to see what our part is in things. Because long as I'm deflecting, like I said, I'm not taking responsibility for my actions. I've got these excuses lined up that are all my get out of jail free, cards. Like,
they're all the excuses. They're all the valid, legitimate reasons why you weren't able to follow through with what you were supposed to follow, or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So, but before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about, we're not going to spend too much time talking about your past and your drinking and your drug use, but I do want to hear a little bit, whatever you're willing to share, about kind of your upbringing and kind of how you found recovery, or like what happened, and give me whatever version you want to give me of what it was like and what happened.
So, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Basically, I can say that, like I said, my mother was schizophrenic.
Okay.
And I grew up, the first 7 years of my life was her trying to kill herself. So it was always on fight, flight, or freeze,
Wow.
as the neural pathways, we know the development is happening in the first 7 years to the brain. And so, I was on high alert at all times. And then she succeeded when I was 7. I found out later how she died, when I was in my teens. And I swore I'd never be like my mother. I swear up and down, I'll never be like my mother. But saying never is like giving the universe the exact coordinates to where you're going to later land.
Yeah. I've never heard that before, but I like it. Yeah.
She was 38 when she killed herself. And I was 38 when I had a psychotic break due to staying up days on end, drinking and doing methamphetamine, and had a psychotic break and found out my husband was cheating on me with a younger woman. I ended up, it's all in my book. I wrote about it because I thought, and I wrote about it in the same fashion as like what happened, what it's like now, kind of format in Mother Load. But I ended up shooting the other woman in the arm. I mean, it's just, it's like almost like I'm talking about a different person as I tell you, Tim, that that's where in the 1991, where I ended up completely out of my mind in a psychotic break, drug induced.
Yeah.
But I ended up going to the county jail. And so, it was a leveling circumstance, it was, but what was heartbreaking was that, I had 2 sons. I had a 9-year-old and a 16-year-old, but I had lost all grips on reality. I had gone insane. And, my mother lost her mind and she never got a chance to get it back. And once you lose your mind, can you get it back? Can I be restored to sanity? And, in the county jail, they're like, I ended up getting a year in the county jail. They wouldn't testify against me. And, but at first I was just like extremely resentful at him once again, speaking victimese, blaming him for everything.
Yeah.
And I had a revelation in there, like, that the best way, and this was a huge leap for me. This is like, start with where you're at. For me, it was a huge leap. It was like, the best way to pay him back would be to be a success. What was that? I didn't, was it another marriage, another relationship? Was it money in the bank? Was it a career, a job? What was success? And I didn't really have an idea of it, but I did have a revelation that I'd have to be sober to find out.
Yeah.
Period.
Okay.
That was like huge leap.
That's a good first step.
Good first step.
Yep.
So I would have to be sober in order to find out what success is. And that started kind of, my journey into Alcoholics Anonymous. But I didn't stay sober right when I got to jail because I was afraid to share my secrets. I was afraid to share them with somebody else, and it's like we've heard the term, drop the rocks and swim for the surface. I wasn't willing to do that because I was bogged down with shame. So I had drank again until Mother's Day. A kid was shot, like a 19-year-old kid was shot in front of my apartment. I was living in transitional living with one of my sons, my youngest son. My oldest son was following in my footsteps. He was in juvenile hall. So, the pattern, the intergenerational pattern, like I'm following in my mother's footsteps. My son is following in my footsteps. History is repeating itself down the line. But when this kid got shot by a drive-by and was laying in the street, for the first time, I did something that was selfless for me. I've acted selfless before, but in the past, but I always had an agenda, But this was an actual selfless act. I went to a suffering human being that was lying face down, had taken 4 gunshots to his body. And when the police got there, they thought I was his mother. and they put the yellow line up around me, and then inevitably they found out I wasn't his mother. And that night, well, I went behind the yellow line, and they took him away in the ambulance. But that night I was freaking out like in total newcomer fashion. Was this a sign from my higher power, from God? And I was so anxious. I was on the verge of like a panic attack. Um, a feeling, a presence came in the room. All I can say, and I had like this moment, more than a moment, an absolute sense of peace. It was like a light that came in and entered my chest and gave me a sense of peace, like I'd never felt before, never ever felt like that before. So later I wondered if that was that God, or was that the boy's spirit? What happened?
Yeah.
What I came to the conclusion of is that, not right away, but inevitably, that by being of service to another suffering human being, I changed.
Okay.
And that's still true today. I changed. I got out of the bleachers and I got on the playing field. I started participating in my own recovery. And that's pretty much what it was like. And, what's happened, in that process of waking up one eyelash at a time. I've discovered writing, but I also discovered, that I could use all of my experience to help others who are struggling with addiction and alcoholism. That I had a unique set of tools that, if I was to use them, I think that if you keep it secret, if you keep everything secret, because you don't want to be judged, or you don't want to take a risk, or people might not like you. It's like you're not using these experiences to help others. Because as you know, it's just one.
Well, yeah, it's and being of service to others. I mean, if you're being of service, if you're helping another person, if you're getting outside of yourself, you're not a victim, because you're helping somebody else. You're making it about somebody else. It's being other-centered as opposed to self-centered.
And you're changing the narrative.
Yeah.
This is how, like, if I'm changing the narrative, if I'm saying, oh, this happened to me and that happened to me, and that's why I did it. But I'm saying, because of what happened to me, I am who I am today. Because of what happened to me, my life has value. I use it to impact others. I use it to share my story, my experience, strength, and hope with others, to hopefully make a difference in it. So I'm requalifying my past from victimhood to empowerment, and that's, it's a huge leap, and it didn't happen overnight. It took time. But the one thing, I was willing to do the work.
Yeah. Were you always willing to do the work?
Not always, no. What happened when I had that experience, things shifted in me. And, it was like, I go, oh my God, there's something, whatever that was, whatever that sense of peace, whatever that light was that filled me, there is something more than just this physical body. There's something more. And I had, I wanted to change the trajectory of my family's lineage of alcoholism, addiction, mental illness, to one of recovery and healing. So what became a really important, critical to me was, becoming a mother to my boys and making amends to them. Because, the book is Mother Load, because for several reasons, but one of them is the load I carried from losing my mother at 7,
Okay.
having it, and recovery. What has done for me has given me the ability to become the mother I never had to my sons, And what I like to tell mothers or fathers or children whose the family system has been destroyed by alcoholism or addiction, it can also be healed through recovery, through commitment to healing the family system. I did not, that was on top of my list.
Yeah.
I had to change the trajectory.
What now? You talked about trauma being passed down from generation to generation. What is intergenerational trauma?
Intergenerational, what Carl Jung used to, it was quoted, I'm probably paraphrasing, what remains unconscious within the family is transmitted to the offspring, and I'm misquoting it. It's transmitted down. So it's like me saying I'll never be like my mother was like that link that made me exactly like my mother. Not exactly.
Yeah,
But
it's like you're putting whatever you put energy into grows.
yes, and so intergenerational trauma is, I believe that we that well, it's I'm losing the word biogenetics. I'm not saying it right, but anyway, there's this belief that a lot of information is transmitted through our genes, and not only through our genes, but through example, of what we've experienced in life, and what you resist persists.
Right.
So I was like unconsciously becoming my mother. I ended up in the same nut house that she was in,
Right.
And much earlier than when I went to jail. But so I ended up there, and then my son ended up in juvenile hall, like I had ended up. I was in juvenile hall when I was a kid.
Right.
So it's like this is kind of being transmitted through the generations. And when one person steps into recovery, there is a ripple effect from that.
Is it your belief that you saw your mother and therefore you put energy into not wanting to be that, and then your son saw you and then he puts energy into not wanting that? Is that it's almost like my experience is the people that focus on staying sober, the people that focus on not drinking, like, I just gotta not drink today, I gotta not drink today, I gotta not drink today. Those are the people that drink. The people that don't drink are the people that focus on living a new life.
Right.
And so when you focus on, like, I'm not going to do that, that's when it happens.
Yes, I think that here's everything that Wendy wants, in her life. This is everything she wants, and here's everything she doesn't want in her life.
Yeah.
My energy is on everything I don't want. Then it's like
That's what's going to happen.
That's what's going to happen. I'm being pulled in that, but it's like part of me just surrendered. It was the magical, like once I had that experience when that boy died, and I absolutely let go, absolutely let go. And like, I'm here, what do I need to do? Use me, let the universe use me. Then I became an instrument. And then there was, the obsession was gone. And if you've had the obsession, like constant nagging of wanting to drink, of wanting to use, of all of your energy going into that, and then it's gone, it's like there is so much room, there's so much space energetically for me to live a different life and to redirect. And I'm the type of woman that has recreated herself several times in my recovery, and I love that about being sober and being conscious and being awake, that I can change, I can change my life. I have choices because I'm not blaming everybody else for my life. I'm
Yeah.
going, I'm empowered. What do you want to create? What do you want to do? It's like decision, action, result. It's like you decide to get sober, you follow it with an action, you get a result. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a simple formula that kind of
It's
plays.
very simple. People make it so hard. It's as they say, AA is a simple program. Not that
Right.
that's what this entire podcast is about. However, like whatever it is, whatever your recovery looks like, it doesn't have to be hard. Focus on what you want.
Right.
Like if you focus on what you want, then that's where the energy goes, and that's more likely to be what happens.
Right.
So, is it important for the family, in your opinion, is it important for the family to be part of the therapeutic process?
Yes. I mean, today I work, I represent an adolescent treatment center, and that I deal with the parents calling in, in their first point of contact. And they, one of the first things I tell them, the family has to be involved in the process.
Yeah.
We have an intensive, we have groups every week, and you're expected to participate. I know this not only from my own experience as an addict and alcoholic, but I know this from my experience of my kids struggling, when they did. And so that becomes a very helpful tool in talking to parents, because I've not only just saying it, it's not something I read in a book, it's something I've lived.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the benefit to see what it's like, and some of what it's like for the family is setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't used to setting boundaries, and some of these parents aren't used to setting boundaries with their kids. They enable, and it's they don't realize how much damage it's doing. But holding your line, which I had to do with my oldest son when he was getting into drugs and trouble, it was like the best thing I ever did was like hold the line. No, you can't come here unless you want to get sober. No, you can't use this as a crash pad. No,
Yeah.
he was an adult, but I think that the family needs to be involved. However, that being said, there are families, there are some people that their family are very extremely toxic and need to disengage with. That can also be a truth.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult when it comes to the family. Many times my experience is that the family wants nothing to do with it because they're not the one with the problem. It's like, I'm not the one with the problem. Little Johnny is the one with the problem. Johnny needs help. Or the spouse. No, Richard is the one that needs help. The other person, the addict, the alcoholic, is the one that needs help. He needs to go get fixed. I'm not doing any work. And it's like, what do we do? And I've had this experience. It's like, what do you do? Because my question is, does it have a negative effect on the person's recovery? Which well, I'll let you answer that.
And what you were saying, Tim, is about like the addict being the identified patient or
Mhm.
problem is also deflecting. It's also not owning your part in things.
Yeah.
So the family is a system,
Mhm.
and it's like with the adolescents that we work with, we know that if we fix like one cog of the wheel and send the person back, the other cogs are just going to
Yeah.
be operating in the same wobbly way. So you want to, empower everybody within that system. And, I want to say I'm talking about two different things. There's the toxic family that somebody may need to get away from
Yep.
because it's pulling them down.
Mhm.
And what's interesting, and I know you know this, Tim, is that if you have a toxic member of a family, that sees somebody getting sober, they will do everything to sabotage, even unconsciously, to sabotage that person when they're trying to get sober. So in that case, you might want to take a step back from that. But if it's, if it's a family that, really is invested in helping this person and wants to, do the work, it's always good when the whole family does their own work.
Yeah. Well, and it's even there was a guy I met with, and he had he ended up having he was unfaithful to his wife, and so 2 years later, I was sitting down with him having coffee, and I said, "How are things going with your wife?" And he said, "They're better than they've ever been." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because she did her own work." And this is the thing, he's the motherfucker, because he's the one that cheated on her. He's the one that had the affair, but she had someone on her mom, like a family friend who is very well respected and a great therapist or psychologist or whatever she does. She said, "Listen, I know that he's the one and he caused the problem, but if you don't do your own work, you're never going to make it out the other side of this." And you can call it like, she was traumatized, so she wasn't the one that had the behavior, but she was traumatized. Even if you just look at that, she was traumatized, so the trauma suffered as a result of the identified patient's behavior. Okay, then you can frame it that way. It's like, okay, listen, we know that you're not the addict, you're not the one with the problem behavior, but you were traumatized as a result of the behavior. Therefore, you've got to do your own work if you guys want to keep your relationship intact on the other side. And by the way, if you do your own work, your relationship on the other side is likely to be much stronger than it's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, if I like what you just said is so true. It's like in order to become the mother I never had, I first had to address the trauma I never dealt with, the unresolved trauma as a
Right.
kid growing up, with a schizophrenic mother who kills herself. So it's like, uh, when I got sober, well, first of all, getting sober gives me the ability to address it. Then next is having to do the work. It's like, I really think that a lot of times growing up or even experiencing things can be kind of, especially in the first 7 years, it's like pouring a mold into concrete, it's like, and it's casting a mold. And when you get sober, it's like, for me, I had to like chisel away at the mold and find out what was underneath and who I was supposed to be, because I was leading a defended life, because I had these survival skills or trauma responses that they talk about, that if I wanted to have a healthy relationship, I was screwed if I was using those same survival skills.
Right.
So yeah, I think we all have to do the work. It's like great that the addict alcoholic is getting help. It's amazing. But it's like, to get your own help so that you're able, I mean, it's like, you know, kids, wives, husbands are pissed off, at the addict because they go through life wrecking, just, selfish and self-centered. And so it's like, yeah, I get it. I went through life pissed off, and it
Yeah.
pretty much defined me, you
Right.
know, and, and until I wanted help, until I
Yeah.
wanted to change who I was.
And to your point earlier, you were, as long as you were a victim in that case, until you take responsibility, you really have no chance.
No, you
You had
don't.
no chance.
You don't.
So you say that you were deeply impacted by dissecting your past through writing. Tell me about that.
So by writing, it's like I wrote about a lot of the experience that I shared with you, and but it's like in writing, this is recovery, and in writing, when I'm writing about myself or things that happened to me as a child, I am going back, like it's almost like an emotional retrieval. I'm going to the parts of myself that have fragmented and split. Okay, does that make sense? That split and broke off. Because what I believe that happens for at least a woman is when she starts drinking, she abandons herself. She leaves herself. I think it's true for men, but like, um, women, like a 13-year-old me, the 14-year-old me, the 15-year-old me, I abandoned her. I left her. So writing and going back is almost like recovering those parts that I left behind, that, and changing the narrative. So, what used to be horrible events or the trauma that I was very attached to becomes kind of this feeling of, ta-da, I made it out. I made it to the other side. And when I wrote my book with the intention, can I show the cover?
Absolutely. Yes, of course. We're gonna get to your book. I'm getting there, but no, you can show the cover. Yeah, go for it.
The cover, the metaphor is it's a load of laundry, a load of dirty laundry. Okay, I'm about to air my dirty laundry. Mother load is spelled with LOAD, load, and the gun is loaded. Okay? As you already know.
Yeah.
But now using this book as like, when I was writing it, it was like I kept hitting a wall, like resistance, like we talked about. But I kept in mind who I wanted to help, because I think service certainly has to be my motivation, or I can shame will keep me small. Okay, the shame of what I did can keep me small. But if I can use this book perhaps to reach some girl that's stuck in juvenile hall, some woman in jail, some man that that hurt his kids, if I can remember, that's why I'm writing this book, to help people. It's that motivation to serve becomes stronger from the shame. And what happens when the book came out, well, this is what happened for me, is initially, I felt like this fear, like, oh my God, I'm exposing myself. Because another thing I didn't talk about in my house is we didn't talk about my mother's mental illness. It was a secret, because there was so much stigma around it.
Right.
But when the book came out and I shared about it, the shame didn't own me anymore. The shame, the shame of, like, that kept me in a box, that kept me playing it safe, that kept me not taking risks. It didn't own me anymore, because it was like, that was freedom. It was like, this is who I am. I'm an open book, and, it's like, which was interesting because, I work in a clinical, in the field of mental health. And, a lot of the people that I knew had no idea. They had no idea about this. I actually had to call people. I said, can we meet for lunch? I've got something to tell you.
Yeah, right.
And so that, they were quite surprised because it didn't come up in marketing events.
Right.
But it's like, I've gotten so much support from people in my field that it was like, I was kind of surprised, actually, that the support that I got. But I don't know if that answered your question, did it?
Yeah, it did somewhat. And so tell me how telling your secrets has impacted your life.
So it's telling my secrets. Basically, the shame doesn't own me anymore. It's like, I am living more of an authentic life. I'm living, it's like I always felt like I was pulling personalities out of a Rolodex and becoming different things for different people. now I feel in alignment with who I am. And with that, finding my voice, you know. Um, yeah, I think I was afraid to use my voice in recovery. I was one of those people that was, you know, unbeknownst to me when I got sober, I was a people pleaser, until like when I didn't have drugs and alcohol, because I didn't care if I was using. But
Right.
once you took that away, I became a people pleaser. I was very invested on how people saw me, and so, um, part of it is maturing, part of it is like, the recovery, but it's like I'm not so invested and I would rather live an authentic life. And that's not just a catchword that I say, it's not something, that's the hip word to say. It's like writing has given me the ability to tell my secrets and to expose myself, come what may.
Well, and they also say you're as sick as your secrets.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, we have to confront that stuff, that those secrets, and what stays in the darkness, what we keep hidden in the darkness can grow, but that which we bring into the light gets healed.
So who would want to pick up your book, Motherload? Who's that book written for?
Well, it's written for quite a few people, but I think that it's anyone that is struggling with sobriety, or it's a what it was like, what happened, what it's like now story, basically.
Okay.
But it's also for people that feel hopeless and feel they need a transfusion of hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's a redemption story.
Great. So you're involved with the nonprofit Have a Soul, and tell me about Have a Soul.
So Have a Soul, SOLE, is an organization that started 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you just a little snapshot. When I was living in transitional living with my son, my youngest son, and I couldn't afford to buy him a pair of shoes because I was on welfare, and I just didn't have any money. And a woman bought him 2 pairs of shoes, a woman that had been through the program before us.
Mm-hmm.
So he never forgot that, but he became a sneakerhead. All right. So he became a sneakerhead. And by his early 30s, he had over 150 pairs of shoes.
Okay.
He was stacked in his room from floor to ceiling.
A sneakerhead means somebody that likes to buy a lot of shoes?
Like, yeah. The ones that want the Jordans, the fresh kicks that are coming down the pike.
Okay.
So he hit a crisis. My youngest was not doing drugs, but he had a crisis with, girls, life. What am I supposed to do? Just what am I supposed to do with my life? And, he was in a dark place, and he looked at his sneakers and he remembered Becky, the woman who gave him shoes. And he decided to give his collection away. He said, there's somebody out there that needs a pair of shoes just like I did when I was a kid. So he drove around the streets of LA and started giving them away and posting it on social media. Okay, that was 8 years ago. So fast forward, here we are. We've given out 35,000 pairs of shoes. We've got multiple Nike stores that send us donations. We were both on the Ellen show, during COVID, and it's inspiring. So he also is changing the narrative of his story, of his life. He did Becky give him the shoes thinking that one day he might go out and do that no, she didn't. She did it for fun and for free. And it was kindness, and he never forgot. And there is that ripple effect. So, I also work for Have a Soul, my son's nonprofit.
Love it. Is there a question that you wanted me to ask you today that I did not ask?
I think we've been pretty thorough. No, I can't think of anything. I think, this has been you're so easy to talk to. I'm sure I've talked so much.
Good. Well, this has been good, and I've gotten a lot out of it. Where can people find you if they want to find you?
So my website is wendyadamson.com.
Uh-huh.
Is where my books are listed. I have 2 books, and I'm also on social media, Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're coming up to the end of the episode. If you're out there and you heard something that resonated with you, please feel free to share that one thing in the comment section of wherever you're listening, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever it is. And whatever you share could potentially help someone else that's struggling and potentially save their life. It'll just take you 30 seconds out of your day, but what you share, like I said, could not only save you, but also save someone else's life. And that does it for this week. My name's Tim Westbrook, and I hope that our paths cross again next week for I Love Being Sober, the show devoted to people in their first year of sobriety. Wendy, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you, and all good wishes.
Thank you, Tim. It was great just chatting with you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.